Hi, folks. I hope you're having a great day. My name is Dave Farish, and it is certainly a blessing for me to be the one to share with you our daily devotional for today. Our theme this week is Christ's steadfast love and forgiveness. And as I thought about that theme, I reflected back to that moment where the disciples asked Jesus, "How is it that we should pray?" And Jesus gave them the very prayer that we pray every Sunday, the Lord's Prayer, at the center of which resides this notion that the ways that we expect to be forgiven by God are shaped and conditioned by the ways in which we're willing to forgive others. Later on, those same disciples asked Jesus, "How many times should we be expected to forgive someone in this radical way?" And I think they offered what seemed to be a rather generous and gracious number. Should we forgive that person 7 times? And Jesus said, no, not 7, but 7 times 70. As if to say that our attitude toward forgiveness need to be shaped and reflective of the limitless, unconditional way in which God forgives us. Finally, as Jesus was dying on the cross, one of his last sets of words was, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." You see, I think Jesus knew very well our need to be forgiven and our need to forgive. And in so many ways, forgiveness is often the gateway through which we must pass if we want to fully be embraced by and fully embrace God's steadfast love. Yet you and I both know that sometimes forgiveness is easy and sometimes it is oh so very difficult. Now today I'm not talking about those times that forgiveness is difficult because the nature of the offense is so severe, so heinous, so horrible. Because in the times that I've been in those situations, really the one time I've been in that situation, it turned out that forgiveness was really the only way out of what otherwise would have been a very deep and dark hole, one in which that wound would have been continued to be opened over and over again. And so while the work of forgiving was no easier, the decision to do so certainly was, because the other choices were just not so good at all. Now, what I'd like to talk to you today about is those everyday moments, those ordinary moments where the offense is relatively minor, yet somehow we find a way to be in a state of unforgiveness over these smaller things. And so I'd like to point our eyes to the 17th chapter of the book of Proverbs and the 9th verse. And it goes like this: "One who forgives an affront fosters friendship, but one who dwells on disputes will alienate a friend." Let me say that again. One who forgives an affront fosters friendship, but one who dwells in disputes will alienate even a friend. You know, I think in today's world, it is so easy to get in the trap that our culture seems to promote, to suggest that there's only one way of doing things and everyone else is wrong. And so it constantly puts us in a state of being in dispute. Sometimes those natures of those disputes are such that while it may seem as though the gulf is very wide, the reality is that in many ways we are closer together than we would otherwise know. And so I think back on the times that I've been in those situations where my spirit of unforgiveness was really not appropriate. And I think back to why that was that I did those things. And I think maybe there are 2 things or 2 motivations that may have led me down that path. One is the false sense of power that comes from being angry, or from being in a spirit of retribution, or knowing that someone's going to get what they deserve. And so lingering in that spirit of unforgiveness really keeps me in that dispute for longer, because I feel in a very false way that it gives me power. Or maybe it's sometimes when I've thought that by being in a spirit of unforgiveness, I'll cut someone off from being able to be in relationship with me, and by cutting them off, they won't have the opportunity to hurt me in that way again. And when that dispute is relatively small, it's, as a friend of mine says, it's like trying to kill a housefly with a hand grenade. I think what it lies at the root of all those things is sometimes our desire to be right outweighs our responsibility to be in right relationship. And I think sometimes even we can festoon that with the language of the church, and sometimes our desire to be proponents of God's justice holds us at arm's length from being witnesses to God's love. And so in those moments when I've found myself in that situation, or in times when I thought I need to do whatever I can to prevent myself from ever getting in that situation, I've came across the words of C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis being the prominent theologian of the 20th century, a lay theologian at that. And he wrote a book called Letters to Malcolm, which he subtitled Chiefly on Prayer. And in this book, which really is a collection of letters to his best friend, where C.S. Lewis described the ways in which he was challenged each and every day by living a full and present Christian life. He wrote these words about the challenges of being in a place where forgiveness seems delayed. And so here are the words that C.S. Lewis wrote to his friend about forgiveness. He said, "I really must digress to tell you a bit of good news. Last week, while at prayer, I suddenly discovered, or felt as if I did, that I had really forgiven someone that I've been trying to forgive for over 30 years, trying and praying that I might. And when the thing actually happened, sudden as the longed-for cessation of one's neighbor's radio, my feeling was, but it's so easy. Why didn't you do it ages ago? So many things are done easily the moment you can do them at all. But till then, sheerly impossible, like learning to swim. There are months during which no efforts will keep you up. But then comes the day and the hour and the minute after which, and ever after, it becomes almost impossible to sink. It also seemed to me that forgiving that man's cruelty in this case, and my being forgiven, my resentment of him, that they were the very same thing. Forgive, and you shall be forgiven. Sounds like a bargain, but perhaps it is something much more. By heavenly standards, that is, for pure intelligence, it is perhaps a tautology. Forgiving and being forgiven are two names for the same thing. The important thing is that a discord has been resolved, and it is certainly the great resolver who has done it. Finally, and perhaps best of all, I believed anew what is taught us in the parable of the unjust judge. No evil habit is so ingrained, nor so long prayed against as it seemed in vain, that it cannot, even in dry old age, be whisked away. Friends, my prayer for you this week is that you'll do an inventory of those places in your life where you find it tempting, or maybe you find yourself residing in a place of unforgiveness. Maybe that's forgiving yourself. Maybe that's forgiving another. Maybe that's being the recipient of forgiveness. But if you find yourself in a spot in which you have done all you can and seem to be at an impasse in terms of forgiveness, I encourage you to, much like C.S. Lewis, be in prayer and invite God to do for you that which you cannot do for yourself. to remove that barrier so that maybe even by surprise, you'll wake up one day and realize that that person that you've been trying to forgive, whether that's you or another, that suddenly you were able to do so. And I hope that you'll wonder why it is that it took so long to do so. Friends, have a great week. I look forward to seeing you when we come back together again. And I look forward to hearing your faith story as you've been so generous in hearing mine. Have a great week. Until we meet again, God bless.